Okay, thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciate that the co-op offers classes, and I'm happy to be here and talk about this topic, which I think doesn't get enough discussion. So thanks for being here. I love questions. You can post them in the chat as we go, and I'll kind of pause and try and answer as we go, or you can unmute yourself and ask aloud if you'd like. Either way is fine. So we'll get started. I'm Dr. Wood. I'm a naturopathic physician practicing with Temple Natural Health, formerly Tummy Temple, um, in Lacey. And I've been practicing for over 10 years. I specialize in complex chronic disease, such as autoimmune diseases, environmental toxicity, and all sorts of gastrointestinal diseases, among other things. And my goal with this class is to offer something low cost or free, valuable, useful to people on the road to recovery from the debilitating effects of mold illness. I wanted to, oh, I think someone is not muted. Hopefully we can, let's see, I'm just gonna mute you. Um, okay. I see a lot of harmful myths being perpetuated about mold that can really contribute to keeping people sick for longer. And so I want to dispel those. And then if you know you're sick from mold, if you want help with testing and need support with recovery, don't hesitate to come in for a visit. I've been specializing in mold treatment since 2022. It's a tough road to figure out on your own, as I know from personal experience. So I was sick with sort of a mystery illness for 8 years, and finally discovered after a lot of investigation that one of the biggest contributors was severe mold illness from a really bad leak that occurred in my car shortly after I graduated from medical school. At the time of the initial damage, I, of course, had the leak fixed as soon as I could, but I just didn't know how big a deal mold was. And I was recently out of medical school, just trying to get a practice off the ground. I just didn't have the means to replace the car, much, or even the upholstery. I just didn't know that that was something you could or should do. So I just kept driving it for 2 years.
Mm.
And so I am coming at this from a place of great compassion, having recovered my health. It was a long road. I know how challenging and expensive these issues can be, and how oftentimes we can't fix them right away. It takes time and saving up money. Um, and so, I want to remove some of the roadblocks, shorten the time to recovery for others. And I know this is something that so many people struggle with, but a lot of times, it's one of those mystery illnesses. You're sick and you don't know why, or there's mold, but you don't know how big a deal it is. Especially in the Pacific Northwest, we get so much rain. This can be an issue anywhere from, plumbing leaks, things like that, but we certainly have plenty of moisture here. So, I'm hoping this can be useful to you, either to prevent mold issues or to shorten the time it takes you to recover. I'm going to mention a couple products throughout this talk, but very few really. Today's talk is mostly about understanding mold illness, like what's happening there, what to do about mold in the home or in the car, how to test for it, how to test yourself, options for testing a house or building. We won't be covering treatment very much because it's a huge topic and it needs to be individualized. And there's so much else to talk about of just like the mold and what to do about it itself. So we're going to start there. I'm not going to be offering any referrals to particular companies, but I will offer some guidance on how to look for a good company. Okay, that's kind of the intro. So we'll dive in now. So, what is the deal with mold? Why is it bad? The mold spores themselves are allergenic, so they cause allergies and they are toxic to our system. The mold spores are like the actual living thing. And many species of mold that grow on water damaged building materials also produce toxins, which are not living, and they're teeny tiny, much, much smaller than the spores. And those are highly toxic, and there are a bunch of different types of mold toxins that can have different types of negative health impacts. So, mycotoxins are like little chemical warfare compounds that not all molds, but some types of mold species produce essentially to defend their territory. So, like if you have like a worse water damage situation that's been there for longer and you can see like different colors of mold, there's more likely to be mold toxins there because they're battling for territory, essentially. Mycotoxins are fat soluble, so they embed in the brain, the liver, the nerves, and the mitochondria, where they can cause damage. The body can process and eliminate them given the proper support, but it's really important to get away from the ongoing exposure. Otherwise, you're just, taking on more mycotoxins faster than your body can detoxify them. And it's just sort of a vicious circle. One of the big impacts of mycotoxins is damage to the mitochondria. The mitochondria are these like little, they're called organelles, but like almost like cell within a cell. So these little um, uh, factories within all of our cells have mitochondria and they manufacture energy for us. So when they get damaged by mold toxins or other things, it can cause this really deep fatigue. It can cause or worsen anxiety, brain fog, and exercise intolerance. And then the toxins trigger this low-grade inflammation, immune system dysfunction, cause hormone imbalances, and damage the integrity of the gut lining. So it really takes a multi-step, multi-systems approach to treat this effectively. But the most important first step is to get away from the mold. Some people will, if the exposure hasn't been that bad or it's pretty new, people can start to feel really crummy, but sometimes they'll bounce back pretty quickly if you just get rid of the mold. So, not everybody needs like in-depth treatment after this, but some people do, and we'll get a little bit into, I mean, some of it is just how long have you been exposed, how bad was the exposure, that sort of thing, but some of it is the person's unique health situation. So we'll touch on a few of the things that can affect that. So since it often isn't possible to instantaneously get away from the mold, for example, like you have to hire a contractor or save up money for the repairs, save up to replace a car, etc. There are things that you can do in the meantime to just like help stabilize your health, but ultimately you really got to get away from the mold to have a complete recovery. Um, there's a caveat I want to mention. A question that I get asked a lot is, well, there are we live in the Pacific Northwest. It's just damp here. There are mold spores kicking around outside all the time, no matter what. So what does it matter if I fix my house? What's the point? And one of the main answers to that is typically outdoor molds are not the same as mold from water damaged building materials. Outdoor molds are kind of in this healthier, more normal ecosystem. And so they're held in check in their growth by fresh air, air circulation, competition with soil bacteria and viruses and things like that. Also, typically outdoor mold species don't produce mycotoxins. So, someone who's been sick from water damaged building materials can recover their health and typically get to a place where they're just not bothered by the presence of small amounts of ambient outdoor molds. Sometimes people will have an ongoing allergy, And that'll be worse oftentimes in like the fall and the spring because that's when it's warmer and wetter, which is kind of mold's favorite situation. But a lot of times people can get to the point where that's all very calmed down and they're just kind of unbothered. Let's see. I'm checking if there's any questions yet. I don't see anything. Okay. Um, so there's a condition that I feel like it's just helpful to know the name of. Oh, are
I
you
have a
raising?
question.
Oh, yes, go for it.
Yeah, does mold necessarily smell? Would you know about it? Because there's a mildewy smell sometimes that I always notice. But
It usually does. Yeah, most molds give off, they're called VOCs or volatile organic compounds. You hear about that in paint sometimes, but molds make those too. So usually, yes. Um, uh, One myth I like to dispel is that I'll a lot of times hear people say like, "Oh, that's not mold, that's just mildew. That's safe," and that's not really correct. Mildew is usually also mold and is still a problem. Um, so yes, if you're smelling a musty, moldy smell, then there's something going on there that needs investigation. Okay. So there's a condition called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, or CIRS, that is just kind of useful to know about if you're kind of struggling in this world. Um, we're not gonna, it overlaps heavily with what we would call mold illness, so we're not gonna go super in depth, but you might hear that. It's good to know about. So it's a dysregulation of the immune system resulting in a constellation of symptoms affecting a whole bunch of different body systems. Um, it's very often caused by toxic mold exposure from water damaged buildings, but it can be caused by Lyme disease or toxic algae blooms as well. And it's one of those things that frequently gets misdiagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome and can be behind a lot of kind of quote unquote mystery illnesses. I'm going to run through a list of CIRS slash mold illness symptoms. Um, you do not need to remember all of these or write all these down, but if you are worried about mold illness yourself, you might just like, pardon me, let them kind of, um, uh, let them scroll by and see if any of them apply to you, and that might be useful. And then I always send out a follow-up email to everyone who was signed up for the class. It's the only email you'll get from me or our clinic unless you sign up for our mailing list. Um, but it'll have a couple things attached, and one of them will be actually a PDF document of a questionnaire that's kind of a useful like initial screen for whether or not you might have CIRS, the CIRS, aka likely mold illness. It's not like 100% diagnostic, but it's a really useful, just like quick, simple screen. So that will have a lot of these symptoms on there, but I'm just going to kind of run through them now. So fatigue, weakness in the hands and arms, especially joint pain, especially in the hands, aching neck, morning stiffness, muscle cramps, headache, light sensitivity, red eyes, blurred vision, tearing of the eyes, difficulty with memory, word finding, concentration, decreased assimilation of information. So having to like read and reread things over and over again to retain information, confusion, disorientation, unusual skin sensations like tingling, especially numbness in the fingertips. Ice pick like pain, so sort of like random kind of sharp stabby feelings that just come on randomly and then go away just as quickly. Uh, Numbness, shortness of breath, sinus congestion, cough, abnormal thirst, appetite swings, difficulty with body temperature regulation, urinary frequency, night sweats, mood swings, abdominal pain, diarrhea, metallic taste, static shocks, and vertigo. So, super long laundry list. There's so much overlap in a lot of those symptoms with other conditions. So, if you have like one or two or a couple of those things, no big deal. That does not mean you have mold illness. But if a lot of those are true, and the questionnaire that I send out kind of puts them in little clusters, and you say like yes or no to the different clusters. So if a lot of them are adding up, that can be a sign. The static shocks thing is really interesting. There seems to be something about mold illness that changes our kind of skin conductivity in some way that people are actually prone to getting static shocks more easily. So, very strange. Um, Mold can also take up residence in the nasal passages and sinuses. So, depending on the study, and there are a couple different studies looking at this, it's estimated that 42 to 96% of chronic sinusitis has a fungal or mold component. So, this is one of the ways that people who previously lived in a water damaged environment, but
I'm
no,
muted. I
dude,
have my headphones on.
oh,
Nope.
I'm gonna mute you. Sorry. If you needed to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself again. Um, okay. And I do see a question. I'm gonna answer that in just a moment though. Um, so that's one of the ways that people who previously lived in a water damaged environment but don't anymore could essentially have like carried a little mold colony with them and still have it years later. There can also be changes in the bacterial ecosystem in the nasal passages and sinuses. So it's not necessarily a mold growing in there, but there's a certain type of bacteria that takes up residence really only in people who've had significant mold exposure. And then that you can like carry around with you for years, and it actually makes its own toxins that can cause a lot of brain fog. So that's a different way that people can have kind of lingering health effects from a long ago mold exposure. Longer term, some mold toxins cause cancer, some cause major hormone disruptions, such as reduced testosterone levels or infertility. Many are neurotoxic, even, in severe cases causing seizures. Some are immunotoxic or suppress immune function. They can be toxic to the kidneys, to the liver, to the digestive tract, causing diarrhea, vomiting, and even intestinal hemorrhage. Some types can cause or trigger inflammatory bowel disease or celiac disease. And many are toxic to the respiratory tract and worsen asthma and other respiratory diseases. Even if you don't have any of these symptoms, if you notice mold growth in your home or car or workplace, it is really worth paying attention to and addressing properly. Small things like mold growth in the tile grout in the bathroom can be pretty easy to address by just cleaning regularly and venting the bathroom thoroughly. Whereas mold on a wall, like growing on drywall or something like that, is a bigger deal and that takes more work to address. And then finally, even if you don't see mold, that doesn't exclude it as a possibility. If someone in your house is having kind of mysterious symptoms, or especially if you smell a musty or moldy smell, those can be clues that there could be something going on there and it may be worth investigating a little more in depth. Um, yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna come around to this question. I'd love some help on how to mitigate mold in the shower. Thank you. Okay, so anytime there's mold, it's because there's too much moisture. So the first preventative thing you can do is make sure your shower, make sure there's a fan in there. If at all possible, I know sometimes you're renting and you don't have control over that, but like at least, see if your landlord would consider installing one. It'll protect their investment. But make sure there's a fan. You can test whether the fan is doing a good job by putting a tissue over it and seeing if the suction will hold the tissue in place. If not, it would be worth considering getting a different fan and then run the fan for at least an hour after every shower. You can even wire bathroom fans so that they run at a very low level all the time, and that would be a fantastic thing to do. So that's one of the biggest things. Like the biggest thing you can do to prevent mold is figure out why there's too much moisture and address it. So that's a preventative thing. But then, the grout is going to get moist from showering or bathing a lot. The thing that I have found to be helpful is, I mean, of course, regular cleaning. Um, I prefer and recommend a product called Branch Basics because it's really um, simple and very effective, but also very safe. I don't get any money from them. Um, and it does a really good job of cleaning that like kind of stained, sometimes moldy grout. So they have like a concentrate that you dilute to a bathroom cleaner strength, and then there's a powder. I forget what the powder is called, but it's like a white cleaning powder. That's so basically you sprinkle the powder over the area that has some mold growing, spray the cleaner on top of it, and let it sit for like half an hour, and then scrub it off. That's the best thing I've found for kind of getting up some stuck mold in a grout type of situation. I'm not sure if that's quite what you were referring to, but hopefully that's helpful. If it's on the drywall, that's kind of a different thing, and we will talk a little bit more about that soon. Okay. So hopefully at this point we can agree that mold is a problem and should be addressed. Why do some people get sicker than others, though? A lot of times there'll be multiple people living in a household and one person feels totally fine and someone else is terribly sick. Um, there are a number of reasons why that can happen. And that type of situation often leads to a lot of confusion and sometimes even the assumption that the person who's sick, it's all in their head, which is not a safe assumption and can be very damaging for that person. So some people are allergic to mold spores, so the actual like living mold particles, while some other people just don't have an allergy to that. So that's one way. In some ways, it's sort of protective to be allergic to mold, because it can act as an early warning sign that there's a problem. Those who don't have an allergy to mold can just kind of slowly get sicker and sicker while with sort of non-specific, vague symptoms like fatigue and brain fog and just not know what's going on. Whereas someone who's really allergic will, maybe be like sneezing when they go into this room or like have more reason to investigate sooner. Some people are genetically predisposed to getting sick from mold toxin exposure. And then some people are genetically worse at detoxification. And so that can make it much harder to keep up with clearing out mold toxins from the body. So, as I mentioned before, I'll send out that questionnaire. So, it's called mold toxin cluster analysis. It'll be attached to the email that I send out. And I think I'll be able to send that email out on Monday. It takes a minute to get the class recording, get the email addresses to be able to send that out, but I'll send that out as soon as I can. So take a look at the questionnaire, and then there are ways of testing yourself. So that can be a really useful next
A
step,
question
especially if the questionnaire is positive.
before
Yes,
you go on, yes,
of
before
course.
you leave the house.
Yeah.
Um, so is mold on shower curtains? If you think you have mold on a shower curtain, is it like, how the heck do you get it off there?
Yeah, that's a perpetual issue, isn't it? So there are types of shower curtains that can be thrown in the wash, but I do think it's kind of a preventative thing. Like it's better to wash it. So for example, I have like a polypropylene shower curtain on one side at my house, and it's gotten moldy, and then I've thrown it out in the past. Um, but what I try to do is every time it actually can just go in the wash, and every time I wash my towels, I just wash that too. And so that's kind of a good preventative thing. And then like wash the edge of the tub where it touches as well. The other, sometimes you have like the really thick plasticky ones, and those I think you kind of just need to like take them down, and ideally you want to do it outside. So like if you have a deck or something, take it outside and just like spray it down with cleaner and scrub it thoroughly, because then it's you can't put that in the wash. That just needs to be scrubbed. So, yep. Um, let's see. Another question is, are all molds in the house potentially bad, like the mold that grows on moist windows? Yes, they are all potentially bad. You want to stay on top of maintenance things like, I mean, wiping that up regularly and cleaning the mold that's growing on the windows. And then also sometimes that means the windows need to be replaced, which again is such an annoying, expensive thing to have to do. But it's if the window is intact and has like the especially the double pane glass, you won't get as much precipitation or any precipitation. And so it's often windows that are really like needing to be changed that are getting all that precipitation collecting and moisture building. So, that's a project to consider. We will get more into cleaning products shortly, John. Thanks for the question. And then, do you need full PPE when cleaning mold off windows? I would wear a mask, and we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Um, some of it, like I do not want to make you panic about a little bit of mold in the shower. I think, it's just good practice to like do things outside if you can, but if you can't, just regular cleaning and as much prevention as you can do is great. Um, it's a bigger deal, like again, like if there was a water damage event and there's like mold growing um yeah, on like water damaged building materials. These maintenance things are really, really good to pay attention to. They really are. Um, but I also, it can actually like be problematic to our health to be in like a panicked state about anything, but mold is one of those things. And so I don't want to leave you super anxious about this. That's also not very helpful. So just trying to give sort of practical solutions without panic. Um, okay, so yeah, well, I think we're going to touch on all those things in more depth that people have asked questions about. So we'll come around to more about that. Okay, so there are a number of options for testing yourself. Um, to be clear, I don't receive any money from any of these lab companies. Actually, I'm not really even going to mention lab companies, but we don't mark lab tests up at all. Lab testing is expensive enough, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, these are, it's just trying to get added information, but there's no kind of conflict of interest there. There's a urine test that looks for mycotoxins in the urine. There's a blood test that looks for antibodies to mycotoxins. So it's not really an allergy. It's like a toxic immune reaction to the different types of mycotoxins. That one is my favorite because there are fewer confounding factors with that test. The urine test can be influenced by um, like, have you been eating foods recently that have mycotoxins naturally occurring in them? How good are your detox pathways? Like, there's a number of things that can sort of interfere with the urine tests. I'm a little less convinced that they're always the most accurate. The blood test, there's a couple things that can interfere, such as like taking immunosuppressive drugs or having like a immune deficiency, but otherwise they're pretty good. So that's typically what I go with. Unfortunately, they're not available through insurance. Like these are specialty labs. Um, there is one blood test called melanocyte stimulating hormone or MSH that you can order through LabCorp through like a standard lab. And that tells us about kind of this aspect of your immune system that gets suppressed by mold. So that one I will run, and sometimes insurance will cover that. And then there's sinus testing where we can do, it's almost like a COVID test, at least the collection, but then they just culture the mucus from your nasal passages. And so that's how you can sometimes find mold growing in the nasal passages or the types of bacterial changes that I was talking about earlier. So those are really useful things when we're not sure or we want to know after we've done a bunch of treatment, are we having, are we really making progress? Um, Things to consider when it comes to sources of mold. The exposure could be from the home, from the workplace, from your car. As a very general rule of thumb, anywhere you spend more than 3 hours per week. So, of course, that's not a perfect answer, but it helps give people an idea of like where do I not worry about? Like I go to the gym 1 hour a week, that's we probably just shouldn't be like seeking answers at the gym. Like that's not the cause of my problems. But if you volunteer somewhere like 4 or 5 hours a week, maybe so, like maybe worth looking into. You can also test your home or your car or your workplace. There are a ton of tests out there. I don't recommend that. There's a bunch that are like a tape test, like you allow dust to settle on a piece of tape or a tape strip, or just like an air trap. Um, I don't think those are the best. Having spoken to a lot of mold specialists, those don't seem to be. I mean, there's so much disagreement in the mold world, but they don't seem to be as accurate. Um, the ones that I have found to be useful are using like a Swiffer cloth to dust like the very dusty tops of bookshelves or something like that after you haven't been cleaning for 2 weeks or so. There's a lab where you can send that in as a sample, or there's like a vacuum attachment where you can like vacuum up dust from the corners, things like that. Um, I think it's really useful if possible to have a professional do the testing. A good mold inspector will not just do a test. They will also, they're almost like a naturopathic doctor for your house. They're going to do an inspection that also identifies potential problems and potential future problems and give you a report on how to address them. So it's a really wonderful preventative service and also um, no testing is perfect. And so having an expert kind of on the ground, like using a moisture meter to check around the base of your toilet and like check walls in an area that you might be concerned about, and also just like look very carefully. That's worth a lot. It's really, really useful in addition to testing. Um, let's see. How expensive are the blood tests and sinus tests? The sinus test is, I don't remember off the top of my head because it's broken down into whether you order just the fungal test, just the bacterial test, and then whether there's a test for biofilm, which is a whole other thing. But I want to say like 250-ish. And then the blood test is, I believe, like 450. That one's pretty expensive. Um, okay, a question about spores. Do you want to ask that now? Um,
Hi. So I do have a mold problem in my house right now. It's like caused me to have to move out of my house for a bit. My housemate who shares a wall with me found mold growing in their closet and on their clothes, even their leather shoes. Um, and I was able to smell it like beforehand. Like I also have a hypersensitive nose. I know
right.
this. But I've just been worried because I still have a lot of things that are there, and I'm wondering like how spores work and spreading. If like I technically have searched my room and I haven't found any mold growing
Yeah.
on like yeah, the visible side of the wall at least.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I'm gonna talk about some more resources that have to do with that coming up soon. So, yeah, I've got some really good resources for you. Um, Yeah, spores do kind of spread indiscriminately, um, depending on the depending on the stuff. There are different ways of cleaning it that are effective, or sometimes if things are badly enough affected, it's worth throwing them out. So it depends. Um, but I'll get you more resources soon. Um, okay, let's see. Um, I do recommend using a mold inspection company that doesn't also do remediation. It avoids having a conflict of interest where the company doing the testing has an incentive to recommend remediation that will benefit them financially. That does not mean that a company that does both is necessarily going to act on a conflict of interest. It just means there is one and they could. So, you know, that's something to consider. Um, I'm just going to give you a few resources in case you need them on finding a company to do mold inspections. Um, let's see. So, the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, or the IICRC, is a good resource for this. I'm going to put that in the chat, the website and the name of that organization. And then the American Council for Accredited Certification, which is a very vague name. Um, they also have a section in their search about that. So there's that one. And let's see. Look for inspection professionals with the following certifications, and then, of course, look at reviews. Here's those certifications. Um, so that's just some resources on that. Um, that said, I know there are situations where it is simply not possible to hire an inspector. So it is possible to do some testing yourself. A company that I'm aware of that provides quality testing is called the Dust Test. So I'm gonna put that in the chat. I don't have personal experience with them, but I've looked into their methodology and it looks pretty good. Um, Okay, so I'm gonna go briefly through like what do you do? There's a you suddenly your house your roof springs a leak, or there's a plumbing leak or something like that. What do you do? Like, what's the first thing you do? So you do everything you can to stop the leak, and you dry everything as fast as possible. So unfortunately, mold growth begins within about 24 to 48 hours of a water damage event. So you don't have a lot of time, but still, like, just do the best you can. And then the proper remediation process is relatively simple, though it can be expensive. Number one is fix the water problem causing the mold. So whether that's a leak or um, oftentimes that would be a leak, or just chronic moisture in the bathroom, things like that. But if we're talking like an event, it is really, really important, if at all possible, to isolate the work area. So that's one of the reasons to hire a professional because they know how to do this specifically. It involves setting up containment. So basically, you like wall everything off with plastic and then have a fan vent system. It's called a negative pressure system set up to like suck air out of that area and then out the nearest door or window. And so that helps avoid spreading mold spores further throughout the house. There's no, already some mold spores will have gotten elsewhere, but just as absolutely as best as you can. Um, that really should be done by professionals who are trained in that IICRC standard for professional mold remediation. And that's why if you're hiring people, you want to find people who know what they're doing. Um, but if you are just doing the best you can with what you have, then you can look that up online and try and mimic that. You want to remove affected materials that can't be cleaned. So that would be like wallboard, insulation, ceiling tile, carpet padding, and other porous items. Um, you just can't. You can't clean those things. Those just need to be gotten rid of. And then anything you can clean, such as like hardwood, glass, metal, plastic, concrete, tile, etc., you want to clean that using a HEPA vacuum and soap. Just like kind of regular soap or like cleaning spray. And then clean the air with HEPA air filters, air purifiers. And then, if possible, you want to verify via repeat testing that the air and the surfaces no longer have abnormal levels of fungal material. So that's kind of like the broad strokes what you do. Water damaged building materials must be removed and replaced. That's like the thesis of this class. Um, that's one of the biggest and most egregious falsehoods. I think it's like a misunderstanding. I'm not saying people are lying, but I hear that so much that you can paint over it, or, um, I've had patients of mine who are very sick from mold have a company come in and say, "Oh, that's not that bad, just paint over it." Um, that is not true. Do not listen to those people. So if a company tells you you can treat something like drywall with a mold treatment or paint over it, you should take that as a sign that they don't understand mold and mold illness, and you should not hire them. Um, don't paint over mold with Kills. That's such a common thing that people are told will be sufficient. So Kills is a paint that contains an antimicrobial substance. Unfortunately, that antimicrobial substance will only be active for about a month or so. And after that, the paint will just be another food source for the mold. So the mold will just start eating the paint and sort of growing sideways under the paint. Um, Instead, you need to remove the damaged drywall and replace it. And then if the source of moisture is removed, there just will be no more mold growth. And so your concern will have been entirely removed. If there is still moisture present, then the mold's going to come back no matter what you do. So, um, hopefully I covered that one thoroughly enough. Okay, finding a company to do remediation. Um, Kind of the same, that same ACAC link that I shared before, that would be a good place to look. Um, and yeah, it's just, let's see, let me just make sure yeah, it's exactly the same links as before. There's just a section for testing and a section for remediation. Um, if you're sick from mold, you should not be the one doing the testing or the remediation work yourself. That's really, really important. Like if you absolutely like, someone in your family isn't sick, they're one of those lucky people that's not as sensitive to mold. They should still wear a mask and like a suit, especially if they're like removing drywall or something like that. But they should be the one to do it. Like if you're sick, you should not be the one to do it. I do highly recommend having professionals do the work. And let's see, we already talked about the containment and negative pressure. Um, if you or a family member are doing any testing or work yourself, and this would be one of those things that, like, if you're wanting to be careful with like cleaning the windows that have mold on them, I would recommend wearing an N95 mask and a disposable, especially the N95 mask. If there's like a little bit of mold on the windowsill, you probably don't need to suit up. But if it's anything more significant, a disposable coverall suit would be a good idea. And then you can look up how to do containment if it's like a water damage event and not just like maintenance cleaning. Um, if you're removing water damaged building materials from like inside your house, I would recommend spraying them down with a soapy spray cleaner like the Branch Basics that I had mentioned before. And then very carefully place them in a trash bag, close that up without like forcing the air out of it. That'll like aerosolize stuff. And just gently remove it out of the nearest door or window, again, to avoid spreading mold spores as much as possible. and then take the coverall and mask off outside and dispose of them. But if at all possible, have a professional do it. So now we have gone through removing the source of the moisture, removing and replacing the water damaged materials. Um, there will still be some mold spores and mycotoxins left in the environment after that. Mycotoxins do slowly degrade over time, um, but pretty slowly. So one study suggested that they might reduce by about 50% per year, though that varied based on the type of mycotoxin. T2 toxin is one of them that appeared to reduce by 20% per year. So given this metric, it could take 5+ years for a building with previous water damage to be relatively low in mycotoxins. It's not great. So we want to speed that up as much as possible. And that's through cleaning methods and air purifiers. Um, let's see, just checking on the questions again. Um, yes, don't use bleach. That is true. And we're just kind of getting into that. So I'm gonna give you a reference that like I'm gonna go over some basics of this, but a lot of what I'm talking about here is from this I believe he's a building biologist who's been doing all of this research on mold and like mold cleaning techniques over a period of many years and published a book, and you can get a PDF copy of the book for quite inexpensive, maybe $25. So I just posted that link in the chat. John C. Banta is his name. So I'm referencing his work coming up here. Yeah, I think it's $25 and it's really worth it. It's great. So basic home maintenance. A hygrometer is really useful and very inexpensive. So that's like a $10 device that measures humidity. Um, you ideally for general health and mold prevention, I would recommend keeping the humidity in your house somewhere between 30 to 40%. Much lower than that, and it's going to be just way too dry for you, and actually increase the risk of respiratory infections if it's really too dry. Um, use a dehumidifier if needed for that. Install a good bathroom fan and run it during and for an hour after all showers. Run a HEPA air purifier in whatever space we're talking about. Get one for the bedroom, at the very least, and one for the living space if you can. And you can rotate it through different rooms. So, you can have it on a like day by day schedule. Um, the one I typically recommend is called Air Doctor because it has a HEPA filtration system that filters down extra small, which is really useful because the mold spores, I'm sorry, the mycotoxins are so tiny. So it helps to filter those out. HEPA vacuum weekly. So if at all possible, get a HEPA vacuum, which has just a better filtration system so it's not spewing the teeny tiny particles back into the air. And do that weekly. Damp dust with a microfiber cloth weekly. Um, Clean with non-toxic detergent, not with bleach. So just soap, just simple dish soap, or as I was saying, I really like Branch Basics. It just comes in a concentrate, and then you get different bottles to dilute it to different dilutions for different cleaning needs. It's a really simple, effective one, and isn't gonna like bleach is adding kind of toxins to the environment, and also it's just not a good thing with mold, and I'm gonna go deeper into that in just a moment. You can just use a little dish soap in water to clean your surfaces. That is perfect because the it kind of surrounds and helps actually physically remove the mycotoxins, which is what we want. We just want to get them out of there. Avoid using bleach, hydrogen peroxide, and even natural antimicrobial cleaners or sort of like biocide killing cleaners. Trying to kill mold with the biocides is really counterproductive, and it's just an unnecessary added expense as well. There have been multiple studies showing that using biocides, so like an actual killing agent as opposed to just soap, to kill mold can actually get the mold to produce more toxins as it's dying. Essentially, like if the mold toxins are chemical warfare agents, they're trying to like fight for their life and like defend their territory, and you're coming in trying to kill them, they're gonna make more weapons as they're dying. So it can actually increase the toxicity of the exposure. Um, the EPA states that the purpose of mold remediation is to remove the mold to prevent human exposure and damage to building materials and furnishings. It's necessary to clean up mold contamination, not just kill the mold. Dead mold is still allergenic, and some dead molds are potentially toxic. So that's the other reason, is that if you just kill it, it's still there and it's toxic. Um, and then bleach, um, it bleaches the mold stain. It makes it white. So you can't see it anymore, but it's not gone. So that's another reason. It's just kind of covering up rather than treating the cause. So for clothing that has been in a building impacted by mold but doesn't have visible mold growth on it, typically you can run it through the washing machine maybe like 2 or 3 times, and that is pretty effective to clean it and get mold toxins and mold spores out of it. If there's visible mold growth on any belongings, I would strongly urge you to throw them away. And then check your plants. So plants can so easily be overwatered, and then they can grow mold in the soil. And so that can be an added mold burden in your home or in your building. If they're cared for appropriately and you don't overwater them, plants help improve the air quality in your home. So, you just have to be careful and kind of like I have gone to our lovely little plant store, Underhill Plants, um, in Olympia, and asked them, how much should I be watering this plant? How much should I be watering this plant? And written out a schedule so that I am watering on the proper schedule and not overwatering them and not causing mold growth. Let's see. Hopefully I covered most of these questions. I'm just looking back through. Um, I think so. Um, I'm not going to have everything written up in the email. One of the questions was, will I be putting all the resources in the email? Um, I will include the links. I'll include the links in the email, but I'm not going to have like everything written up that we talked about today. So just refer back to the recording, um, if you have questions about specific things. Let's see. I heard you don't want to use bleach on wood that got moldy, but vinegar-based cleaner. Um, if so, if if the wood is not very porous, um, or has like a sealant on it, you can just clean off the surface. If it's like impregnated in the wood, um, you can sand it off, but you want to like take the layer that is discolored off. So depending on what you're talking about, that's a thing used in remediation. Like say there's like the underfloor layer of wood has mold microbial growth on it. Remediation companies will like dry ice blast it off or sand it off or something like that. But if it's like a piece of furniture and that's going to ruin the piece of furniture, then you should probably just get rid of it. But if it's like a table and you can sand a thin layer across off the top and then refinish it and you want to do that, then great. Let's see. Oh, yes. I see your question about the email. I'll be including the links in the email, yes. Okay, my HVAC has a purifier and HEPA filter in it. What kinds of questions do I have ask the HVAC company to ensure it's removing mold spores? I think it's that's a great thing. I think it's fantastic that you have that. Um, I think any HEPA filter will do a decent job. And then this one is maybe a little bit better, the one that I recommended. But I think that, any HEPA filter, even if the um, kind of gaps between in the filter are a tiny bit bigger. I did actually read a study on I think it was like conducted by NASA that was saying there's also some sort of electrical forces that grab onto um, contaminants as they're passing through, and so I think any HEPA filter is helpful. Um, so you don't need to like replace everything, but I do think that Air Doctor one is especially good. How about water shoes that smell mildewy? The smell doesn't come out in the washer. I would probably throw them out, but depends on how um, concerned you are. Um, okay, so mold treatment does need to be individualized and managed by a doctor. It's beyond what we can cover today, unfortunately. If this is an area you're really struggling with, I would recommend coming in for a visit. I would be happy to help kind of walk you through this. Um, and get started with testing if needed, or if you just already know that there's a mold issue, we can come up with a customized treatment plan and don't need to do expensive testing first, or at least not that, not to confirm the mold diagnosis. There may be other tests that are useful to figure out like what body system have been impacted. So in the meantime, the HEPA air purifier in your home is really, really important. So this is like, can't fix everything immediately, or we're just looking to like be healthy and sort of protect our systems from mold as much as possible. So air filtration, eat a diet as high in as possible in polyphenols, which are essentially plant antioxidants. That's another handout that I will attach to that email. The handout is not meant to be like only eat these foods. It's meant to be here are ways that you can add in more polyphenols to your diet. So, what are the foods that are absolutely richest in polyphenols? So, I will send that along. Increasing dietary fiber is very useful. Go slow, start with a little bit and slowly work up. Uh, Dietary fiber helps keep the bowels moving, which helps with detoxification, but it also has a very gentle binder effect, so it can actually bind onto and carry some of the mycotoxins out of the body. Um, and it's like the gentlest binder option there is and has all of these other benefits. So something like working up to a tablespoon of ground flaxseed or a tablespoon of chia seed added to your diet 1 to 2 times a day. Make sure you combine that with plenty of water. Otherwise, um, taking too much fiber without enough water can be a little constipating instead of helping with regular bowel movements. We have a fiber product that we manufacture called Smooth Passage, which is it's got two different types of fiber, and then it's got some soothing gut healing herbs in it as well. So that's a really nice option. Um, let's see, I am going to share one last link, which is our just the couple products I'm mentioning will be in there. And so you can take a look if you're curious. Um, Many people with mold illness actually react to regular probiotics, but spore-forming probiotics seem to be a good fit for them. So the one that we carry is called Immunospore. Um, and so that may be a good option. Sauna therapy is really, really helpful for just clearing some of another route that mycotoxins can take out of the body. Work up if you tolerate it to about 30 minutes 3 times a week if you can. That's really useful. And then address constipation. If you are constipated, mold toxins are fat soluble and they need to be detoxified via the bile, and therefore that has to come out with bowel movements. coffee enemas and colonics can be really helpful to aid in that sort of detoxification. So I think we're reaching the end. We do offer 20% off of the couple products mentioned if you are wanting to try them for the next week. I think it'll start Monday when the email goes out and go through the following Monday. Um, and then $30 off a 1 hour visit if you'd like to come in for a consult or try one of our other services like a colonic or lymphatic treatment. Um, so that also in the email we'll send out a discount code that you can just like self-apply when scheduling online, or you can just let us know at the end of your visit. Um, let's see, any last questions? The class coming up about how to add more fiber. Oh, fantastic. That's wonderful. Yeah, you can go to that class. Any last questions before we wrap up for the day? Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found this useful. Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for being here. Um, all right, we'll keep an eye out for that email and lovely to be here with you. I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much,
Uh,
Dr. Wood.
yeah, thank you to the co-op and to Monica for hosting these classes. We
Thank you
appreciate
so
Yeah,
much.
Thank you.
very helpful.
it. All right. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Bye.